Hello everyone, so I just wanted to say a few words about this Wingmakers novel subtitled The Ancient Arrow Project. I've been working through this over the last couple of weeks and I've read through most of it now, or had it through an ebook reader. And yeah, you can see published 1999, Wingmakers LLC. It appears there's more than one version of this actually. I found another version which I'll include the link for to download in the description. So it's basically written as a novel, and it's got a prologue about an ancient tribe, 826 AD, and they seem to be in touch with an ancient civilization somehow. I didn't really follow this bit very closely, and they talk about these chambers that have been built. And there's 23 of them. That's not mentioned in this bit, but it comes into the story. And they have a spiritual connection to this higher race somehow, as you can see here. As you are a traveller of the sky, we are the makers of your wings, and that's, I guess, where this Wingmakers description comes in. So there's a bit of a sort of setting there, and then more interesting to me was the next part, the introduction, which I'm going to read out, and it says, in 1948, several recoveries of crashed UFOs justified a special National Security Agency budget to establish a new organisation with its monolithic structure responsible for securing, protecting and analysing technologies recovered from extraterrestrial spacecraft. It became known as the Advanced Contact Intelligence Organisation, ACIO, created as an unacknowledged department of the NSA, that's the National Security Agency. It had the dubious honour of being the most secret of all the research labs within the US government. Based in the high desert near Palm Springs, California, this heavily fortified and secretive compound housed top scientists from government laboratories with pre-existing security clearances. The ET imperative, as it was called in the 1950s, was considered to be of vast importance to the national security of the United States and indeed the entire planet. The ACIO was charged with analysing recovered alien technology, in whatever form it was found, and discovering ways to apply it to missile technology, guidance systems, radar, warplanes, surveillance and communications in order to dominate the arenas of war and espionage. In the 1950s, several alien spacecraft were recovered with aliens inside, still alive. These incidents occurred not only in the United States but also in the Soviet Union and South America. In one such incident in Bolivia, a brilliant electronics expert called Paulo Neruda removed some navigational equipment from a crashed UFO and bargained successfully to join the ACIO in exchange for its return and the use of his services. Paulo Neruda and his 4-year-old son Jameson became United States citizens in 1954. The elder Neruda had become a high-level director of the ACIO before he died in 1977. His son Jameson joined the ACIO shortly after his father's death and became its primary expert in linguistics, encryption and decoding technologies. The young Jameson was a genius at languages, computer, alien, human, it didn't matter. His gift was considered essential to the ACIO in its interaction with extraterrestrial intelligence. The recoveries of live aliens in the 1950s had created a new agenda for the ACIO. A technology transfer program grew out of the recovery of extraterrestrials from two distinct alien races known as the Zeta Reticuli and the Cortium. Now, obviously, the Zeta Reticulans come up with the Betty and Barney Hill case and various others. I've not heard of the Cortium before, though. Selected technologies from these races were provided to the ACIO in exchange for various services and privileges extended by the US and other governments. The ACIO was the repository and clearinghouse for the technologies that grew out of the TTP with the Zetas and the Cortium. The ACIO's agenda was broadened to develop these technologies into useful non-military technologies that were seeded into both private and public sector. Before their time, technologies such as integrated circuits and lasers were among the progeny of the ACIO's TTP with the Zetas and the Cortium. So that's quite an interesting sort of backdrop to the story as far as I'm concerned. And then I'm just going to go through and pick out a few things which struck my, took up my interest, as well, or sparked my interest. And just initially, at the start of chapter 1, for example, it says, Your theories of evolution are simply laid upon an existing paradigm of a mechanical universe that consists of molecular machines operating in an objective reality that is knowable with the right instruments. We tell you a truth of the universe when we say that reality is unknowable with any instrument save your own sense of unity and wholeness. Your perception of wholeness is unfolding because the culture of the multidimensional universe is rooted in unity. As your wholeness navigator reveals itself in the coming shift, you will dismantle and restructure your perceptions of who you are, and in this process humanity will emerge like a river of light from what was once an impenetrable fog. So of course this is getting into the consciousness aspects, which of course has really interested me in the Wingmakers materials. And you could argue that this is just some B-grade science fiction novel which has drawn on some spiritual teachings and the UFO lore, to come up with this. But I think there's more to it than that. Again, people in the comments have sort of some have felt the same way as I do. Perhaps some think it's all disinformation or whatever, or a marketing scam. And it possibly is. But there's certainly a lot of things which tie up with what I've read elsewhere, which is why I find this so intriguing. So again, moving on to a couple of other bits now. They talk about an ACIO facility here on page 14 of this PDF. It'll be different if you download another PDF. I got this PDF years and years ago. I couldn't find this same copy. And it talks about a building that is run by the ACIO, and it says on it, the United States Government Experimental Weather Center Restricted Access, and it says the ACIO was to anyone who might wonder by a government weather centre responsible for developing sophisticated weather instruments to help the US military and intelligence communities better predict and even control weather conditions across the globe. This was part of the ACIO's mission, but only a fraction of its budget and project plan went to these endeavours. So of course I was very interested in this because of, for example, what happened on 9/11 with Hurricane Erin, which was obviously happened after this was written. So I have maintained, and if you read my book, Climate Change and Global Warming Exposed, there seems to be a history of weather modification. Also, you can look at people like, what's his name? There's a climate viewer, I'm trying to think of his name, his first name's Jim. I mentioned him in the book. He's done a lot of research into the history of weather modification. So that really piqued my interest as well. So the fact that was in was very interesting. And all the artwork as well, I've always found this intriguing. I've not seen artwork like it anywhere else. Maybe I just haven't looked at enough of it. But it is very, very interesting. It does seem to have an effect on you, a subtle effect, which is what they say it should. But at the start of chapter 2, for example, this is another, again, getting into the consciousness aspects. It says, all beliefs have energy systems that act like birthing rooms for the manifestation of the belief. Within these energy systems are currents that direct your life experience. You are aware of these currents either consciously or subconsciously, and you allow them to carry you into the realm of experience that best exemplifies your true belief system. When you believe, I am a fragment of First Source imbued with its capabilities, you are engaging with the energy inherent within the feeling of connectedness. You are pulling into your reality a sense of connection to your source and all of the attributes therein. The belief is inseparable from you because its energy system is assimilated within your own energy system and is woven into your spirit like a thread of light. So again, this idea that a belief is actually a form of energy, that's I've never thought of that before. I find that really interesting, and it maybe explains why we do draw these things into our lives. It explains perhaps certain synchronicities, or and it's another expression perhaps of the law of attraction, expressed in a different way. I find that very interesting. Now in the story as it develops, you learn that the Wingmakers are kind of like gods, as it were, and they've seeded humanity, or they've manipulated the gene pool on Earth. And there's a good segment of the story where there's this character called Samantha, who is a remote viewer, and she somehow sort of observes the activities of the Wingmakers and finds this sort of holographic workshop where they're actually, examining planets in holographic form. And she says, I get a strong sense that this sphere is in a database like an information catalogue of potential life-bearing planets. These beings are like genetic planners, and they're assessing which genetics should go to which planet. Yes, that's the purpose of this place. It's a repository of all life-bearing planets within our galaxy. And then later on in the story, the Wingmaker, there's a sort of more direct statement attributed to the Wingmakers, which I'll show you next. And on page 226 of this PDF it says, "You may refer to us as Wingmakers. We are actually quite human, simply a future version of you. Humans of your time, conditioned as they are, seem unable or unwilling to comprehend that a future version of themselves could have invented humanity and seeded its genetic structure across the universe in which you now live. Humanity is a far more diverse and ubiquitous form of life than you think. It is an ideal soul carrier, and its format is as common throughout the universe as there are life-bearing planets to sustain it." Now this very much reminded me of what Wilbert Smith said in 1958 in his Ottawa address. I'll include a link to a video I made of that, him speaking, him actually giving that address just to a microphone. And he said that the human race in the form of man is spread throughout the universe and is incredibly ancient. Now that material didn't really become known about until the early 2000s, after this was written, and it was published by Grant Cameron. I'll include a link in the description to the video of that, as I say. So I found this very interesting, and this also ties in a little bit with what Lloyd Pye said in one of his essays about cosmic dump trucks or cosmic arcs, where it appeared to him that rather than the theory of evolution being correct, that these new species were popping up on Earth, just from nowhere basically, and replacing other species which had then died out. And he argued that somebody was monitoring the conditions on a planet as they developed and changed, and then dumping these life forms there when the conditions would support them. And that's kind of very similar to what's said here. So again, that caught my interest too. And then it talks about this, the Wingmakers are, saying that your planet is on a perilous intersect course with a synthetic race bent on taking over the genetic codes that this planet has sustained and supported over the past 800 million years. And the part of the story revolves around them decoding this optical disc. I mean, that was mentioned in some of the last videos as well. So that part of the story is also told in a little bit of detail, not a massive amount, in this novel, and that's quite interesting. And the Wingmakers talk about this synthetic race, which is called the Animus. And the technologies we have left for you to discover, it says here, are able to coordinate this incoming energy to transpose your genetic structure to a higher dimensional existence, an existence that will render you invisible to our ancient enemy, the Animus. They are the soulless creatures of your nightmares. Your planet has experienced them before. It was nearly 300 million years ago, when the genetic structure of the planet's life forms was not so highly developed and thus not as desirable. When they return, they will not be so apathetic. They will see the soul carriers of your planet as being worthy of their pursuit and conquest. And it talks about an invasion happening in the year 2011, and these things taking over. I forget where this is. Yeah, well, just actually it's there. I just missed that. Let's go back. Yeah, which is when the synthetic race will take over your planet and enslave your citizens in 2011. Now, of course, it seems crazy because it hasn't happened, but then I asked the question, well, look what's been happening with the COVID scam and the dehumanization of people, and that just didn't happen overnight. Or it seemed to, almost from our perspective, but it seemed like this planning that happened before, the thing with the Johns Hopkins exercise, the event 201, funnily enough 2011 201, some common digits there, and then we've got this guy at the World Economic Forum saying, that they want to, not talk about God, they want to kill God and get rid of the body, that was said by one of these. It's actually Klaus Schwab's advisor that said this based on this book that he'd written. So it really makes you wonder if this is what's actually happened, that we've had a covert alien invasion, and the leadership has been infiltrated and causing all these awful things to happen to us over the last few years, and of course maybe it wasn't 2011, maybe it was before that, because of course we had things like 9/11 and all kinds of things. So this 2011 date is kind of questionable, I suppose, but the idea of it, I think, is maybe not new, but I find it interesting. So, again, as a novel, it's quite an interesting read. It's paced a little slowly. The dialogue is average. I mean, from that perspective. But there's a lot of interesting bits from the Wingmakers material interspersed with it. So, make of it what you will. Now, going back to the animus discussion, where we've got these synthetic beings which want to interbreed with us, that's what it says in the novel as well. I didn't cover that in what I just read, but they talk about the animus wanting to interbreed with us so that they can develop their own soul carrier, because they basically don't have one. And that part of the text sounded very much like what was discussed in this program by Richard D. Hall, which was done in nearly 10 years ago now, with Daniel Silverman and Professor John Bickerstaff, based on the Song of the Greys by Nigel Kerner. They talk about harvesting souls and stuff. It was a very similar thing. So again, you can look at that. And going back to the weather control issue, you can read my book about climate change there. I'll leave the link to that in the description. The Wilbert Smith material is there. In the address I mentioned, that's there. The Lloyd Pye essay I mentioned, that's there as well. You can look at cosmic dump trucks, as you see I've highlighted there, or cosmic arcs. You can look at that. But then finally, to finish off this video, one of the people commenting on the previous video alerted me to the fact that the original Wingmakers site was changed, and these supposed interviews between Dr. Neruda and Anne, they had the text changed, and somebody was able to capture these changes and write an article about them, and I'll leave the links into those as well. And you can see here that some of the text was changed, and some things were taken out, and some things were added, which is kind of weird, so why was this editing done? I haven't studied this in any detail, but if you look at the additions and deletions, they themselves are interesting if you consider them in the light of what I've been discussing in the rest of this video. So you can look at those changes there, very diligently highlighted it seems, and there's two interviews there that you can go through. I haven't been through them all yet. I don't know whether I'll invest the time. I'll just see how much time I get, but very interesting. And those changes that seem also to be discussed. Oh yeah, and that's the link to the downloadable version of the Wingmakers novel. It's different to the version that I had. And then there's other PDFs on the Wingmakers website that are current, that you can download them currently. Dr. Jameson Neruda is interviewed on the Wingmakers website there. You can download that PDF. And there's an article about this written by Wes Penray, or Penra, I don't know how to pronounce it, from June 2011. You can read that. I haven't studied all of that, but it talks a bit more about the quorum race. So you can have a look at that. So all very interesting stuff. A lot of information again. I know it's all very much stuff to be evaluated. And then so finally, just to finish off, really, going back to this website, the wanttoknow website, it's very interesting. It's got the Wingmaker stuff, it's got lots of other stuff. But be aware, this site was created and I think is maintained by a chap called Fred Burks, who used to work for the George W. Bush administration as a translator. That's all on here. But coincidentally, a chap wrote to me very recently about an email exchange he'd had with Fred Burks. So I'm just going to discuss that for a minute now. So Fred Burks wrote to this chap called Nick, or rather Nick wrote to him, and Fred Burks replied regarding why there wasn't a discussion of Dr. Judy Wood's 9/11 research on the wanttoknow website, which has a lot of 9/11 related information, but next to nothing about Dr. Judy's book. So Fred Burks replied, I haven't read whatever he was referring to. I am familiar with Judy Wood's books and theories. I agree with many of them. Yet Want to Know's mission, WantToKnow.info's mission, is to reach those who don't yet know about all the major corruption and deception going on. We are not interested in preaching to the choir. To talk about directed energy beam weapons taking down the Twin Towers to people who still largely believe the official 9/11 story is almost certain to turn them off. And he goes on a little about that. So what he's basically saying is, well, yeah, it might be true, but if it was, we think we'll put them off, so we're not going to tell them the truth. So they're worried about putting them off. They've got all this other stuff about mind control, aliens, UFO crashes. Apparently that's not going to put them off. But talking about Dr. Judy Wood's research is, so, what does this guy think he's doing? Well, he was involved, I can tell you, early on in the 9/11 Scholars Group, and he helped Jim Fetzer start a food fight over access to domain names and intellectual property rights and stuff. That's what I can tell you about Fred Burke from my own experience, and I wrote that up in my first book, 9/11 Finding the Truth. So I'm going to leave it there for this video now, and I'll say thank you very much for watching. Thanks for all the comments and the person that directed me to this Fred Burke's material, and I hope you found this interesting and that you'll get something out of exploring the Wingmakers materials. So thank you again, and bye for now.